And it's going to be Harstem versus Lambo to kick off this Group B. There are other matches happening that we will go over once I have everything settled. So let's do the intros first. Top left, it is Lambo. Bottom right, it is Harstem. Let's swap that around. So we do have the B stream on both me and Fear Dragon stream currently. They started the B stream, Group B earlier than the end of Group A. So Fear Dragon could have swapped over, but then would have missed out on a second stream for the leftovers of Group A. And I could have just not cast until Group A was done, but then you would miss probably the first 3 matches, actually, of Group B. So, you know, thought it'd be better to actually cast as much as possible and give you guys the series that you would like. So I figured that you guys would love to see Lambo versus Harstem. Let's also get some bets for people who are starting to trickle in. And I think we are now good to go. So the other matches that are happening include like Raynor Solar, Euthermal DNS, Shadone T-Bull, and I'll get into the other matches for, I guess, each set of matches. You know, they four matches at a time is the way it's done. When we get to the next match, I do perceive this as being one of the longer matches, though. So we'll see how that times out with the rest of Group B. Also, this is a new, technically a new scenes collection, which I actually thought wouldn't be a big deal as far as all of the correct settings. Except when I started the stream just a couple minutes ago, I noticed that there wasn't any mic or desktop sound. So for some reason, adding a new scene meant that my audio was completely disabled. Everything was disabled. I go into settings and set it up. So if anything is off, please let me know. I did not participate or did not anticipate this becoming a problem. Anywho, it should be okay. Everything should be on the level now that I've got that fixed. So the black box over the players' names shouldn't be a black box for very long. There we go. Just didn't have the loop on. But it was the sponsors, and then it did stop looping. Now it's fixed. There you go. And there's no delay today, as this is a live event. People all around these players can very easily watch them, and basically they're being watched almost 100% of the time. So if they were to all tab over to a stream, it'd be kind of obvious. It would be kind of obvious. So that's the nice thing about doing the B stream for such a live event. Now, Harstem versus Lambo, what's actually happening in this game? The usual PvZ things, as of this meta, I suppose. So, Lambo getting up the 3 base, Harstem also getting up the 3 base. Extremely fast, though. This is one of the fastest third bases you can get. I feel like it kind of fell out of fashion for a while, which is 330 third base. That is, I believe, before your second gateway is... I don't know if it's put down, but certainly before it's finished, because we're watching it finish right now. I think it might even be before it's put down. So you really just put it all into the Stargate production, and then you do warp in consistently with the 1 gateway that you have. But otherwise, kind of the fastest third you can get. I think more so we see it around 4 minutes rather than 3:30 nowadays. But yeah, just a minor note, but one that might make it more understandable as to how Harstem basically has his third on the way, as Lambo only is now getting his saturated. You're like, wait a minute, ZVP, that's not supposed to happen. Well, yeah, it does, actually. But as I said, I feel like I haven't seen it in a while. 4th base comes down, because, of course, Zerg does want to be a step ahead on the base counts. And the expectation for this PvZ, for maybe even all the games in a best of 3, is going to be the Blink Stalker. Now, if it was best of 5, I certainly would anticipate 1 Charge Archon. Maybe a Resident Glaives build on one of the shorter maps, because it would have to make it into the map pool. But at best of 3, both of them have 2 vetoes, and this certainly being one of the largest maps, actually the largest map. Yeah, I was expecting Blink. It is going to be Charge, though, not Blink, and this is actually a bit weird then for Lambo. A lot of Zerg players are going into +1 melee immediately. Now, that isn't necessarily because the only thing it deals with is stalkers. If that was the case, they would be dying left, right, and center to anything else, which they don't do. But it certainly seems to have come along with the Blink Stalker era and does work rather well against them, but can struggle against mass charge lots because we know how the charge lot versus Ling dynamic can work. It takes an extraordinary amount of Lings, even with upgrades, to really defeat, let's say, a 18-20 Zealot ball. Now, Banelings are included, that can be different, but then the Archons are there as well, and it's a little bit more of a dance, right? Which, can be a very interesting dance to watch. But you certainly wouldn't want to stay on just pure Ling Baneling, as that just gets really difficult to afford over and over and over again. And that is a sucky situation already for Harstem. Rip. 10 probes go down, because he got pulled aside from the Ling run by and didn't really see the Banelings coming in, so oops-a-daisy. De facto C-stream. I'd say I was hired as B-stream, so that's what I'm going to label it as, but to be honest, I wasn't hired at all. They were just like, do you want to do this? And I was like, I guess. The shield battery overcharge is unfortunately going to fall. As good as the attempt of Harstem was to block out those probes, that'll be a lot of damage on that third base, but Harstem is pushing across the map, and Lambo only recently started adding on roaches, something a little thicker, to deal with the charge Archon, which really isn't, it's very chargeless currently. There's not a lot of zealots. Good stasis trap, great stasis trap actually, even creates a bit of a force field, so that the only path really that's open for the Zerg to spill forth is through the mineral line. But Harstem not feeling like he can push the issue despite that amazing stasis trap, despite the War Prism finally coming on board, but it is what it is. He's going to pull back, trying to get a fourth base up and running, but did not do very much damage to Lambo. Has supply blocked Lambo a few times at this point. I've noticed the red. But Lambo is still... I mean, he's kind of thriving still, I would say. 4 bases, 72 workers. Maybe isn't all that impressive, but Harstem's very fast third base. That was great for him. Yeah, fourth base. Actually, not that quick, having to lost 14 probes. Did I go 14 probes? In at least one of the situations that could have been avoided, for sure. But in the grand scheme of things, I guess with such a supercharged economy, and it going into the mid to late game, I guess 14 probes really isn't that bad. So that means we got ourselves a macro game. One that's going into Charge Archon Storm, getting its +2. Lambo did move over into almost pure roach production, add on the Ravages, of course, but now is also adding on centrifugal hooks, more Lings, and Banelings, giving a very explosive composition. I love that Harstem is doing something with this Warp Prism that isn't just warping in Zealots, which can get very easy for the Zerg player to take care of, can't it? It's, yeah, a little one-dimensional. But a Warp Prism with Archons controlled as well, it's a little bit more frustrating to deal with. And then maybe it will open up the opportunity for Zealots on the left side in the future. Currently not so, and Lambo is checking around for the R movement as well, with, I think, Overlords, maybe? I don't know if all 4 of them wanted to go there. Yeah, they're going to spread creep, yeah, okay. But that is going to give him some advanced notice, as well as an advanced pushing point. Maybe he can even do a couple of transfuses if he continues moving the creep spread forward, but we got ourselves a bit of a queen pool. It's always weird to call it that after it was known as being so all-in and kind of hitting fast and hard, right? But this is at 10 minutes. It is still rather dedicated, especially if Lambo is going to take any damage to the charge lot run buys. This is going to be a very expensive army. So if he loses it, I'm not sure he's really in a position to replace it yet. He certainly is starting to get a bank, but depending on how this engagement goes, because it could go super poorly for Lambo, he might even be immediately counterattacked. So far, so good for Harstem. He's got the Archons on the front. Storm's actually hitting exactly what they would like, and of course remaining alive as well. And this was a beautiful defense. Lambo tried to set up the biggest concave possible, try to push everything into Harstem, hoping that there would be some little crack in the armor, but there was zero. Stag Defense helped out, only got depowered, didn't even get destroyed. Stay Strap on the left took out an entire angle of attack, as well as, of course, more units. This is Harstem's big whoopsie-daisy, though. All the High Templars were pushed to the front because they were chasing the army to the left, and then the army went back to the right? So the High Templars got pushed to the front, and that has now given Harstem 0 storms as the next wave already collides in. Now, as I was talking about earlier, you know, Lambo's follow-up might not actually be all that fantastic. He didn't have that much of a bank, so I think that's the reason why Harstem is not going to lose this game, despite not having particularly good engagement that time around. All of the storms taken out of the equation with basically none of them actually getting slapped down. That was the most terrible thing that could happen, right? So initially, it was like good things with the amazing defense of the first hold, but then the second one was kind of the opposite, complete opposite. But again, Lambo didn't have 2,000 in the bank, or even more than that, so instantly remax, and then you have to remake the Ravagers, you have to make the Banelings, and Harstem is barely holding on, I think directly because of that. The shield battery is helping out as well. Overcharge is still available, being very patient with that currently. And round number 3, I guess we'll call this one. Baneling's trying to roll in to hit maybe the sack defense. The one shield battery doesn't even get actually the contact with it. As the shield battery overcharge did help out those Archons a tremendous amount, and Lambo is now starting to run out of steam. I think he really was trying to, I mean, almost to a point force the issue, but kind of obligated to force the issue. And had he had a slightly bigger bank, a slightly faster remax, or did even slightly better in the first engagement and then had the amazing second engagement, I do think that Lambo has pushed at least to kill the 4th base. And then Harstem is holed up on the 3rd base, and then it is still a playable game, but not nearly as convincing for Harstem, who I think is now just straight up in the lead. His army has gotten better. His +3 upgrade's going to finish. More Archons have been added on. Of course, he's been comfortably on 4 bases. The probes have very rarely had to be pulled away. And Lambo is still stuck on this lair-based composition. Good pull on the probes there. 7 of them do go down. That's what's going to happen when there's +2 melee. Another attack into, I guess, the 3rd base this time is going to capture even more probes. And 8 more go down. Couple of drones just went down to a Zealot run by to the bottom left. Good on Harstem to check that. Make sure that doesn't go unhindered, I suppose. It is brand new. So already knowing about it, looks like Harstem's gonna make a beeline towards it while also just coincidentally chasing away the army. And also trying to get his 5th base, which almost worked out perfectly. His army was moving over to the left side, so expanding to the left side would've, could've, should've worked, but just a little bit late to actually save the Nexus, and no cancel there either. Oracle is gonna run out of juice, but for Oracle's always hanging around, adding in that damage, that is a threat. One that didn't exist when the Queens were pulled initially, but now is always going to be a thorn in Lambo's side. More Zealots trying to find more damage. So far, rather unsuccessful. I think the best thing they've done is scout so far, but you can see the economy of Lambo has really not been touched. Only 14 drones have gone down compared to the 40+ probes. But Harstem, as I was saying, has a very good army when he moves across the map, and I'm thinking that should be soon. It will be not quite an unbeatable army, but it'll be a super great one. It'll be very good against what Lambo has. Lambo's going to have one hell of a surround, as well as one hell of just a Harstem making a mistake. Harstem just bulking up all of his units as much as possible. Another cancel on a 5th base by the looks of things as Lambo continues to buy time, because, you know, his army, even if it is maxed out, might not size up to the Protoss army, depending on how the engagement goes. Certainly when it's not maxed out, when he's still missing 30 supply. It's not going to be that great. And again, Lambo's problem is being supply blocked, something that had irked him in the past, but he was able to recover from rather fluidly. Now is hitting him at the exact wrong time. Overlords pop, Banelings do form, because of course they don't need an extra supply, and Lambo might just barely be maxed out for this maxed out Protoss push, but certainly not in a comfortable position to anticipate the push, deal with it, get this around, set up. It's all already going to shit. Lambo is too late to get something ready. But again, look at this Protoss army, man. That is 12 Archons. How does a Ling Baneling Roach Ravager army take on one of the most perfect Protoss ground armies ever? it's just not really supposed to. Maybe buy more time, maybe get it to pull apart from itself, so a couple Archons there, a couple Archons here. But otherwise, even with some really baller micro from Roach Ravager, as the Archons and their short, stubby T-Rex arms can't quite shoot them, eventually there's no more room to hide. There's no more room to micro, and that is exactly what's happening as Lambo is forced back into his natural base. He did manage to make this into a bit of a base trade, as his gold base is going to go down, his third base went down, but at least he killed Harstem's fourth, and the fifth ever got up and running, but it is not going to be good enough. Harstem still got 4 Immortals as well, packing a punch from a distance on top of the Roach Ravager. Lambo not willing to give up yet, though, knowing that he killed his opponent's economy quite hard as well. There was a 4th base kill, and a bunch of probes were killed, so Harstem's only mining off a certain number of mineral patches, but what his bank can make him is just better than what Lambo's can. So eventually he'll out in 3 more Archons, 7 more Zealots, whatever it's going to be. I don't know where he's warping them in, as the Warp Prism did go down, or never was remade, whatever one it was, but it's still a very good army. And Harstem has done enough economic damage to his opponent as well. With the gold base down, more drones were killed at some point, and Lambo without a bank, it is a losing game for Lambo. GG. GG. Hello, everyone. So one thing I forgot to put on is Twitch alerts, so I gotta do that. Thank you very much to 80s Mullet for the raid. I think I'm going to change the scene transition. Okay. AI Cop, thank you for that Prime sub. I will replay the message, the alert. Top right, Lambo. Bottom left, it is Harstem. Once I find the darn thing. There we go. That didn't work. There's no cannon rushes there? Okay, great.
Thank you for becoming a member. Twitch Prime sub received.
Just,
thank you for appeasing the Overmind.
Thank you. Alright, alright. So, now we move on to Inside and Out. A shorter map, but that wasn't really, well, yeah, that was maybe one of Lambo's problems, doing his mid-game really quite dedicated build. It's for all the people out there that get upset when you say all in. Oops, sorry guys. Didn't want to change over there. Did anyways. So now everything should be good. Bam, bam, bam. So Lambo went for the mid-game dedicated push. Brought the queens, brought the creep, tried maxing out on Roach, Ravager, Ling, Baneling to bust Harstem, and Harstem had one of the best initial defenses that a Protoss could ever hope for. Stasis Trap caught a lot of units, took out an angle of attack. Stag defense remained up and mostly running the entire time. Storm, High Templars safely behind the Archons that took the brunt of the Banelings. That's just perfect. And in a concave as well, so even more perfecter. The follow-up attack, not so much. Harstem actually was dangerously close to being tipped over with the follow-up attack, killing all of his High Templars that had Storm, and then 3 of them were energy short. So that almost tipped it back into Lambo's favor, but because the first attack, I think, went about as poorly as it did in Lambo's side of things, and he didn't have, as I was saying, a 2,000, 3,000 bank, there wasn't enough to really push Harstem off that ledge. If it was a shorter map, could that have happened? Maybe. I think we are talking about an awfully close game, one that when you look at it from afar, maybe you're like, was it close? Was it, I don't know. But absolutely, I think that's the type of game that if there's a few more Baneling roll-ins, if there's a few more Ravagers, if there's even 20, 30 more Lings, actually, there could be a huge difference. But I don't know if the closeness of the map really is going to be all that impactful when the map isn't going from, like, the last one to Waterfall. I think Inside and Out is still one of our middle rush distance maps. You do kind of expand, I guess, to each other on this map, but with the windiness that is protecting the third base, giving it even more defensive structure, it's not that short. And then the chokes as well. It'd be brutal to actually push through if Harstem's on top of it. Yeah. Anywho, will Lambo even go for that type of attack again? I mean, that it might be in question. Roachborn is coming down first and foremost, so Lambo, despite seeing that it is in fact a Stargate opener with at least 2 Oracles so far, could be a third, is going to add on a Roach Warren. Maybe not fairly quickly, but he's going to have it and maybe just not use it for a while, because there really is nothing to use it on as of yet. Oh, I spoke too soon. Just a couple of Stalkers coming out. This is a... Yeah, so 2 Adepts go into the natural, and then 4 Stalkers go to the right. They're going to clear up maybe some Creep Timbers and 2 Overlords by the looks of things. This is annoying. But yeah, you don't need Roaches to deal with this. You just need to make any units whatsoever. So that's exactly what Lambo's doing. But I guess that's where the supply blocks from earlier came from. These weird pokes forward, which Lambo just didn't have the units spread around to stop. So, okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. It is going to be Blink and +1. But Lambo not going into +1 melee this time. He's going to go into pure Roach Ravager, which can work against Blink. There is no... It's not so set in stone that if you go for Ling upgrades, you're banned to face Blink Stalkers. If you go for missile upgrades, you demand to face, charge that Archon. But it can cause some complications. The amount of Roaches that you get isn't exactly... It doesn't exactly outproduce the amount of Stalkers that can be had, all right? I mean, technically, on a technical level, it does, the amount of units, but when you compare the power of the two, it is kind of nice for the Stalker player to take on a budding Roach player as they desperately try and get out as many Roaches as necessary to kind of tip the scale again. The Stalkers, with their relative cheapness, I guess, again, compared to Immortals and Colossus and all that stuff, as well as the Blink that keeps them alive, can be really brutal. And then in this case, Harstem even has a faster +1. I mean, Lambo, I feel like the first game he was anticipating Blink. He got Charge Archon, had to kind of adapt on the fly a little bit, but turned it into something that was still very scary. And the second game, going into Roaches, he might have again anticipated Archons, or maybe even been a little wary of like Resonating Glaives, right? But it is Stalkers. It's Stalkers coming at him right now with the Warp Prism, and he has Minerals and Gas locked up in a Spire, which I don't think he's really capable of using right now. I actually legitimately, the main reason that I think Lambo anticipated a different composition is that Spire. All right, like the Roach Ravager I think can work against this, although tipping the balance is really difficult to do. But the Spire, I am pretty sure that a Spire is just bad against Blink Stalker 3 base. Okay, and I don't think it's that bold of me to say. It could be. Maybe Lambo's going to come in and watch this and be like, actually, the Spire is very effective if I just do this, this, and this. And I'll be like, okay, yeah, you would know. But it seems like every time someone has tried to go Spire against this, it's because they didn't realize it was going to be this, and then they die. They never use it, it's wasted, so on and so forth. And that is taking up some of the supply that would be really helpful for Lambo to have right now to help push back a mass amount of Blink Stalkers with that +1. Now, Missile did finish for Lambo. He was able to build up a decent number of Ravagers, but he is missing some of that fodder. So every time they engage, you know, ideally, Harstem blinks back the weakened Stalkers. Lambo can't really do the same thing. As much as he would love to be able to transfuse indefinitely or, you know, turn every weak roach into a Ravager, it's not nearly as easy as Blink is. So with every engagement, this is supposed to get worse for the Zerg unless they can finally once and for all push this back, which is incredibly difficult to do since Roach Ravager is a really one-dimensional type of army engagements, especially without any speed on it, which they do have, but they'd really have to set up in advance to try and get a surprise surround to a guy that has over 20 Stalkers. So this is decent, as it is on creep. Kind of jumps on top of Harstem when he's not expecting it, because he also was dealing with a Ling run by, which is absolutely perfect of Lambo to get in there with something. The Lings also could have tried to come from behind with the amount of Stalkers that have been built up. That probably wouldn't have worked, so the best thing they could do is go for the run by, which kills 11 probes, does successfully distract Harstem, lost mining time, couple of lost units on the defense. Maybe they took down a cannon or something that I wasn't noticing, because there is usually a cannon in the third base with this style of play. A cannon or a shield battery, or I would say often both. But yeah, not even going to be replaced here. I think that might be a thing that Harstem regrets. We shall see. But so there's a lot of reasons why the Spire can be difficult to, I guess, get put to use against a Blink Stalker player. And I'd say first, it's because it does take up that bank that would otherwise be going into very necessary units on the ground, because the Stalkers, they start pressuring kind of quickly. Even if you're not necessarily dedicating all that much to it, it's still kind of a quick poke. So that's the first problem with it. The second problem is that, of course, you aren't dealing with someone who has a limited number of anti-air units, who's not on Blink yet, who doesn't have a couple of Archons, which then have trouble running around the map on, right? You actually have someone who has a lot of Blink Stalkers. So ideally, for the Protoss player, they have 8 Stalkers ready to respond to the initial limited number of mutas. But that's not really what's happening here. In this case, the mutas end up being a surprise, which is something that I didn't really get to go over, but they were not scouted. Yeah, never saw it on the main base. So Harstem, he doesn't have his units spread out. He loses a handful of probes, and we'll have to rebuild that with 4 Nexus. It could happen, but then his entire army loses all of the engagement potential. It has to pull all the way back, and actually Lambo, seeing this, is just going to go for, I think, a quick and easy, maybe not kill on the Nexus. I don't know if I can get a kill, but it's going to go for a lot of harassment damage. There's no reason not to. And Harstem knew about it. Harstem knew that this was going to be a threat. He's been very active with his oracles. He got that revelation on the army. But when his Stalkers are all coming through this one little choke here because the mutas are distracting them, it's going to take forever for him to respond anyways. So he's lost all momentum. He's lost his economy, and he might still lose his 4th base as Lambo is almost maxed out, ready to rumble, got centrifugal hooks done. That is a feisty number of Stalkers, though, and okay, well, I don't, okay, the split, okay, yeah, off creep, all right, Harstem certainly anticipating the necessity to split once he blinked forward, realized that would be a problem, and does a decent job at splitting, but still loses a handful of units on his side of the map, which means that Lambo could probably recover, as well as his oracles, which, I don't know, keeping them alive is surprisingly useful a lot of time in PvZ nowadays. So this Spire has worked out amazingly. Because Harstem was forced to pull back so damn much, because Lambo was able to hold with Roach Ravager just barely enough, and actually get to a point where he was comfortable to build mutas, they have been super effective. 31 probes killed. I don't feel like this countdown, wait, what is it called? This tracker, there we go. This tracker has been going for a good 3-4 minutes, but yeah, at the end of the day, Harstem has had to replace so many probes to even be at an okay amount, and so his army hasn't really grown to its full potential. A couple of Archons added in are extremely helpful, but definitely needed more, and now it needs more Stalkers. That +3 is done on the Stalkers, but there's just too much Zerg. Lambo successfully defends the Blink Stalker attack, gets into mutas. They cause so much damage. And Harstem is unable to keep a tight control on the PvZ, which is really what the Stalkers are tasked with doing, is keeping a tight leash on the Zerg. I think Harstem is pretty much dead at this point. GG. Well played, Lambo. And we'll take it to game 3. I will still say that it is very risky to go into Aspire. We haven't seen, I suppose, all that many games with the Blink Stalkers compared to the previous meta. But of the ones that I've seen, anytime there was an attempt for Aspire because they think that they can get away with it, or they didn't really understand Blink Stalkers at the time, so this was a month ago, they would die. They would just die. But Lambo, showing the power of the Spire when, you can actually use it. Been a while since I watched StarCraft. Got a taste of it again after watching Caster Calls. Oh, cheers, mate. So top right of Trackable Sacrifice. Trapical? Trapical? Oh, that's what I can do if Trap's ever on this. Trapical. It's going to be Lambo. Bottom left, it is Harstem. So they're choosing the middle of the road rush distance maps. I do wonder if Harstem could have pushed his Stalker aggression a bit more. I think if we did go back into the replay and thought of ideal situations, which is still very harsh. I mean, Harstem is still playing at a very high level, but if we think of the most ideal situation with those Blink Stalkers and their +1 push, I think we are talking about a very frustrated Lambo. A Lambo who is barely always catching up. So, saying maybe more active and engaging more often than what Harstem did, which was engage a few times and then, retreated or was going to retreat, then I think that's when the Lings were set up as well. And then on the topic of the Lings, actually having a cannon and a shield battery to help out, which, again, I'm not sure that he did. If he did, then that's my bad. But those were unupgraded Lings. There didn't seem to be that many of them. It kind of looked like he had one or none stack defense structures up at that third base. Which, yeah, if maybe he had a cannon and a shield battery, it would have been a no-brainer as to how to defend. And if you don't have to defend it, then you don't have to pull back. And then you just consistently engage with the roaches, which are still very one-dimensional. The Lings can get surrounds. They tank shots, even though they do get shot down very easily. They still do a lot of tanking for it. And just actually basically that surround and the threat of a run-by make Lings a lot scarier for that style of play. But the roaches, you can more easily size that unit up and say, okay, here's the line. Let's dance over the line. Where the Lings are always going left, right, and center. So I feel like perfect play, like absolutely perfect play. Harstem maybe could have pushed the Stalker issue more, and Lambo is struggling more than he did, which, initially it was maybe a little bit of a struggle, but I think he was already fairly well protected, although his fourth base did die, or almost died. Yeah, so I think that's what he was really worried about. But anywho, not much point in saying what would have ideally perfectly been the situation. StarCraft is a game of forced errors, and kind of also a game of risk management. So knowing that there might be an error here, but then knowing that you're going to perfect something else. So every time you look away from your main army to go and make sure your macro is good, that's always a bit of a risk assessment. And unfortunately, Harstem, when he did just lose control of the situation, you really lose control of the situation when someone can build mutas and then just run around. And Lambo did a great job of that. So what is the style of play that Harstem will be bringing forth for map number 3? He did Charge Archon, he did Blink. Lambo did the initial responses that are usually the opposite. So he went the melee against the charge. He didn't realize it was charge initially. Then was able to kind of roll out of it, but did a mid-game push. Didn't really work out. That was game 1. Game 2, possibly anticipating the same thing. He went for roaches. Again, kind of like a fairly quick roach one, a safe one for sure. And then it was Blink. and then you could see that he swapped over into melee once he figured that that was going to be the compositions here. So, while Lambo also starts his kind of decision early on, +1 melee, or not, basically. You know, wait until roaches get +1 missile. And this one is a fast evolution chamber, so it's going to be +1 melee. It is like, okay, which one are each of them doing? Lambo goes for +1 melee. Harstem, TBD. I don't know yet. But he is going up to 4 oracles already. Yeah. Already going up to 4. He might have noticed at some point with his oracles a better opportunity to use his oracles. Maybe there weren't as many queens. Maybe the spore crawler was late. Just kind of what's happening here. Lambo thought he'd get away without a spore crawler, which he technically kind of did, losing queen and a drone though. And now it's going up to 5 oracles. I wonder, is Lambo, yeah, just gonna get bopped? It's kind of the silly thing about oracles, is that if you know, if an overlord sees the 4th oracle, which it, you know, it never would, the Stargate's not being scouted at all, then Lambo is able to correctly bring forth the amount of queens, or, of course, he just gets a spore crawler that he can move back into. But because he doesn't know how much Harstem is dedicating to it, and it is certainly a choice to go for more oracles, they're kind of expensive, they heavily delay a Twilight Council, costing the same, right? So, you know, you don't usually anticipate such fast 4 oracles or 5 oracles. But in this case, I gotta imagine Harstem just noticed that Lambo was kind of greedy. He put his queens on his 3rd so that he didn't have to build a spore crawler, 75 minerals, and 1 less drone, and tried to take advantage of that. Now, in the grand scheme of things, did it work? I don't know. It looked like it was close to snowballing, but it didn't actually snowball. 4 oracles, as 1 did die, is still very helpful on the defense. It's actually still very helpful even on the offense, as Lambo is tasked with replacing his queens, getting creep spread out when it's been hindered a little bit, and thus might not have anti-air towards one of these middle of the map engagements, and that's when oracles swoop in and kill all the Ravagers, right? We see that a lot. But yeah, I think there was maybe a little more of a snowball chance if that 1 oracle didn't die. And the blink is coming down rather late, so very much when it comes to this oracle production, like right off the bat consistently, because we see Hero, you know, really is still leading the way. We see him add on 4, 5, 6 oracles, but usually after like the 3rd one, or I guess the 2nd one maybe, and then blink, and then the 3rd one, or something along those lines. And then maybe as he sees fit, he might go for more oracles afterwards. But this was right into oracles consistently, heavily delayed that blink, and while that blink will finish, and +1 will finish, and the game will go on with the 4th base coming down with Harstem, it does mean that he hasn't had blink to engage in the middle of the map with something a little more concrete than oracles. Oracles, at the end of the day, are harassment units, even though for a second there you had to wonder. But Stalkers, actually, they can threaten a game over. Without a Warp Prism, without a Proxy Gates, I don't believe that these will be game over at all, but they are also just threatening some positioning, right? At first, it's the Stalkers, and they take down the Overlords, take down some Creep Tumors. Oh, that's annoying. And then before you know it, 8 more Stalkers join in, a Warp Prism joins in, and they have not had to get off your side of the map in quite some time. This was awkward. This was awkward. This was a overreach from Harstem. So his blink had only just finished as he moved his Stalkers in about here, I want to say, and then blink was done. So, I don't know, instead of trying to run away, he ran in. Very much knowing that he was going to recall, of course, and trying to make sure that he got away with as many Stalkers as possible, but looked like he could have retreated. He decided not to. Oh well. 5 Stalkers have gone down. Resources trade still favoring Harstem, as his 4th base was protected as well. There was a rather large run by that almost interrupted his flow, but not quite able to hold on. But let's look at the economy for 1 second. 72 probes, 4 bases for the Protoss. Yes, quite well done. 90 workers for Lambo on 5 bases. Ugh, that is scary, as Lambo has not been interrupted very much in this game. Banelings finally successfully rolling into the 4th base after denied in the natural and denied with the stasis trap once again at the 3rd base. And we have Hydras getting a little bold. Yeah, there's actually not that many Hydras. Another stasis trap taken away. What is supposed to be their fodder? Another stasis trap. Gonna take down these banelings, and 2 Archons are left to soak them up, or the cannon, or what have you, but it is unlikely that these banelings get damage done. I mean, they have +2, so all it takes is 1, right? But they should not get damage done. And Harstem, I think, knowing that there's really no momentum gained here, is moving on into kind of the perfecting Protoss maxed out army stage. Not back and forth, Chargeless over there, Blinkstalkers over there. No, just staying back home, defending against Lambo strikes, and trying to get to the perfect ground army once again, which worked out well in the first game, but there was a little more push and pull in that first game, because Lambo did try and go for a humongous engagement on a relatively low economy. This time around, he has macroed up hard, and his choice here of Ling, Baneling, Hydra goes into something a lot scarier given an opportunity, which is, of course, Lurkers. Now, Lurkers are not on the menu so far, as Lambo looks to continue engaging with Ling, Baneling, Hydra, and rolling by with the Banelings. But that is always on the Protoss's mind, and especially when they see Hydras, is, okay, are they going to Lurkers? How much time do I have before they go to Lurkers? Can I hit them before they get to upgraded Lurkers? Can I hit them before they get to 15 Lurkers? Can I survive if they do get to the amount of Lurkers? And for Harstem, I feel like he is a macro Protoss, very much so. I could see him adding on a Stargate and a Fleet Beacon here, as opposed to trying to take any particularly good engagement before Lurkers are out, which of course still not an issue. Lambo is just maxed out on Ling, Baneling, Hydra, so Harstem needs to deal with that first and foremost, can worry about transitioning at a later time. This might look like a surprisingly difficult engagement for the Protoss, as the supplies weren't all that bad to begin with, but it's because a large chunk of Harstem's army was actually engaged to the top side. Decided to go for something a little bit more important than that 5th base, goes for the 4th, where all the drones were pulled into. It's also where the lair is, so that would be a kind of a big reset on the technology. It's not going to go down, though, as Lambo does choose to pull back. So he's going to be able to take care of this. The Blinkstalkers might be able to evacuate, maybe. But, it's going to be weird. It's going to be very weird. Harstem thinks he might have an opportunity while Lambo is chasing around the army to go after another base, but that is not really correct. Lambo's army was not that far away. And that is the good thing about taking this 5th and then this 6th right now. So Lambo's able to protect it from multiple directions. And Harstem is just taking more of the beating. He lost more of his workers. He's lost more of his army, or maybe not more, but certainly an army that he can't replace as much anymore because he lost his economy. And he is trying to play the straight and narrow game. And unfortunately, I'm doing so hot. I guess with his runarounds right there, it wasn't really straight and narrow, but he was punished for that too. So the Stalkers on the retreat did not get home. They were steps away from getting home. Very sad story. Storm is done, and Harstem did a fantastic job in game number 1 utilizing these storms, but that was on a more straightforward game to that point. He was at 150 supply with a couple of Archons to help protect the High Templars. While he is getting to that point, key difference is the lack of overall supply. So can he protect the storm? Can he get those storms down? Can he protect the High Templars so that they have another handful of storms? As just trading at this point is not going to work out for Harstem. Yeah, the layer going down would have interrupted this infestation pit being added on. But, that said, actually, I think that if this was the target, if this was focus fire down, Lambo would have been restarting one instantly as this one went down, and probably as a no later infestation pits. And the timer has truly begun, unbeknownst to Harstem, although I'm sure he could guess it. He knows that he's in a difficult spot. He knows that Lambo has control over the game. He just needs to focus on the here and now, which so far so good on the left side and right side as well, with the choke and the ramp on his side. Couple of Archons, couple of storms threatening do send Lambo into, I guess, second guessing himself, but now rolling in with the Banelings. Okay, didn't actually hit most of the probes. Again, so far so good. Harstem holding on right now. Wants to protect that one High Templar with the storm in just a couple of seconds. Oh, it has one already. It slaps one down to send those Hydras running away, and the Archons now feeling maybe even overconfident. Those are Hydras with good range. Archons cannot tackle them all by their lonesome, and that might have also just been a misclick as Harstem was also defending the top left. Looks like his High Templars took one Baneling to the face, but fortunately for them, they survived. I guess with the help of the High Templar, the shield battery there. And Harstem has successfully held. I mean, that is pretty good, because while his army supply wasn't that bad, it was down 40, now it's down 30 or ish, I guess, all over the place. It was a very difficult hold to make. If he did not have Storm, then that's really troublesome, because Storm was at least threatening whenever Lambo decided to pull the trigger. But then also his split of the Archons could have gone much poorer. Now he's going to engage on the other side of the map thinking that he might have an opportunity, or even that he has to do so, which I could understand the feeling of having to, but there was no success to be had with a push over onto Lambo's side of the map. He was totally prepared to handle it. GG. Yeah, Lambo took control of that game.